So, welcome all to this panel discussion on setting up your own digital publishing platform. I'm here with Gabriele from Qeios. How do you pronounce it again? Qeios, is that correct?
Qeios, yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Jean-Sébastien from SciPost, and Jeroen Sondervan from, I think I can also say from openjournals.nl.
Sure, yep.
And today I'm gonna have a discussion on 4 questions that I prepared. But if you want to ask questions yourself, also please do so in the chat, and then we'll cover them, of course. So first, I'd like all 3 panel members to tell us a bit about their personal experience with setting up a scientific publishing platform. So Gabriele, let's start with you.
Yes, sure. I should say that my only experience so far with publishing platforms has been Qeios, our project. I come from medicine as a background, and I dropped out the medical career to start up Qeios and go on with that. That's my A plan, and I don't have a B plan for now. So basically, my experience with Qeios started. I mean, with Qeios as a publishing platform started actually as a side effect. I was designing a platform for research reproducibility and comparability, not a publishing platform. Okay, at the very end. So I started designing myself this platform with the concept of definitions in it. I mean, there is a huge problem of comparability, reproducibility in science, and the main reason, one of the main reasons behind that. At the time of conception of the project, I realized that was the problem of incomparability of definitions. So basically, any research teams is using different definitions to compose their studies. I mean, related studies are composed with different set of ingredients. Okay, I come from medicine as a background, so for example, one example for all, the definition of quality of life, there are out there more than 1,500 different definitions of quality of life, and any research teams basically is using the one which best fits his paper, you know. So at the very end of the process, papers result. The result is that papers are totally incomparable. You cannot compare related research. So our proposal at the very beginning was to provide the researchers, the same community, with a platform where they could discuss all these ingredients, all these basic definitions related to science, and not just discussing them. I mean, really peer review these definitions, these building blocks. So from this point, we basically designed an editor. Okay. Starting from that, we designed an editor where researchers could use immediately these building blocks to compose their research. So this is the link between the initial proposal, I mean the definition thing, and the publishing platform. We wanted researchers, at some point we decided that we wanted researchers to use directly definitions in their research papers on the platform, so that they can compose directly on the platform with these peer-reviewed ingredients, and then they can immediately publish this research on the platform, and again reapply after publishing the concept of the peer review post publication. Like with the ingredients at the very beginning, we are reproposing that with the final product, which is the article. So at the very end, you have an article, like on medRxiv, bioRxiv, whatever, or like in a severe article, whatever you can imagine about research. Okay, and the process of peer review is post publication. So my experience with publishing platform has gone this way. You know, we started with a different purpose. The aim wasn't to build from the very beginning a publishing platform. The very end, it came kind of automatically. You know, we had everything in our hands to compose a great publishing platform, and that is what we did.
Yeah. You say we. How big is your team? Are they all working on it full time, or?
Not everyone is full time. We are 6 of us, so the team is still small. 6 of us, and 2 of them are not working full time, and the other ones, yes. Yeah.
All right. So thank you, Jean.
Thank you very much,
Jean-Sébastien. From SciPost, we already talked a bit earlier. For you, it's besides your other job responsibility.
Yeah. So I'm Jean-Sébastien Caux. If you find Jean-Sébastien too complicated, just call me JS. So indeed, I'm a theoretical physicist. I'm a professor at the University of Amsterdam. I've been in the Netherlands for many years, but you know, being Canadian, of course, I bring a different ingredient to the sauce. So I do condensed matter theory. I'm very busy with all these things, of course. So you know, for me, the SciPost project is really something that goes into my mostly evening, night, weekend hours, to the cost of many other things. The project came out really of my experiences as a researcher and as an author of scientific publications. You know, I worked as an editor in a number of journals in the past, and I kind of went through very many different editorial processes in my career as an author. I must say, you know, I like building stuff. I like building machines that work, and I like machines that solve problems. That's my job, you know, solving problems. And essentially, at some point, I started having some gripes about the way research itself was being like mistreated by publishing venues. Also about the way kinds of editorial decisions, which are made by people very often without proper knowledge about the field, actually have such a radical impact on the lives of scientists. I mean, you're not talking about their life on that very day, but you are talking about their employment. You're talking about their perspectives. You're talking about which country they're going to live in. And, you know, it's very, very difficult to have to outsource these so important decisions to places that might not always use scientific criteria in order to make the decisions. So you know, I guess over the years I was complaining more and more about these things. And the joke is that at some point I was like complaining so much that my my colleagues, in particular, one of my colleagues in particular, said, "Look, you know, JS, we've kind of have enough of you complaining here. So either you shut up about it, or you do something about it. But just please, like, stop talking." So unfortunately for that colleague, I decided to do something about it, which means I talk even more about it than I used to.
Yes.
But that's the kind of experience, and you know, so that's around 2015, late 2015, when I decided to really like do a beta version of the whole thing. So what I wanted to do is essentially reset the whole thing. I kind of did a big survey of existing initiatives, why I thought that they weren't quite up to what it should be, and decided to rebuild everything from scratch. So from, you know, all the refereeing protocol, wanted to open this up. So we're active in physics at the moment, but we're trying to expand in other fields. In physics, open refereeing was not a big thing. So I had a lot of discussions about experiences in other fields with open refereeing. So with people like Uli Peuschel from atmospheric chemistry and physics and these things, you know, it was very instructive at first. So I kind of plucked lots of experiences from different places. And, you know, I sat down on my bum in my armchair and I started coding. So I taught myself like web programming and just built up the thing. The beta version was ready in early 2016, ran that internally at the University of Amsterdam, but then in the first third of 2016, just threw the thing open. And we ended up publishing the first paper in September 2016, so almost 4 years ago. So the idea of SciPost is really that we want to leverage the idea of openness to increase quality at every level of the publishing protocol. So preprints are already part of the culture in physics, so there was no need to go for that here. But the notion of open refereeing was very important for me, because I think also referee reports have to live up to the same standards as scientific publications. It's very important that these things are visible, corrected. So for me, the fact of having the contents of referee reports openly visible to the community was super important, as if the referees themselves were referee. Another very important thing was that even if people were not explicitly solicited to provide a report, that they would have a way of sending in a report. Very often, publication in the sciences is a bit of a lottery, because you send an article to a venue, and the venue chooses 3 referees to invite. One of them sends in a report. You're lucky, you get in. You're unlucky, you don't get in. But you have plenty of other experts in the world that would be able to make small comments on the manuscript as it's being evaluated. And if you close the door to these contributions, you're actually not doing a very high-quality service. So we opened that up that way. And then the decisions are also made by a kind of communal grouping of academics. We call that the editorial college, and we don't call our decision makers editors because they don't edit. We call them fellows, because so maybe deformations of my Oxford years back then, college fellows and things. But the idea is that all editorial decisions are taken exclusively by people who are themselves professionally active academics. So then we run it like that, and we also have post-publication commenting facilities on this. So that's for the editorial side. Another side that's also very important for me is the actual business of publishing. So we have a completely different business model than normal. We are anti-APCs. We don't like the idea that authors should pay, or that companies should charge thousands of things for this. We work on more consortial model, whereby universities and funding agencies provide us the means with which to run our operations, and we completely divorce the editorial side from the financial side. So there is no incentive for us to publish a paper to cash in on APCs. That's possibly the kind of most brutal, mortal flaw of the APC system. So for us, these things are completely separate. We encourage institutions to give us some money, and we can run an infrastructure at a fraction of the price of other things. Just for last year, the calculation shows that for about 400 euros, we can run really, all our thing, including all the high-quality editorial processes, for that amount of money. So we'll see how it scales up, but I think it offers a really, really important alternative to the current businesses that exist. So like I said, we're busy in physics. We're currently busy expanding. It's still a very small team. So there's me and my weekends, and I have now 2 full-time people helping with the editorial administration and handling the sponsors and thing. Most of the actual technological development, that's still on my shoulders. We are going to expand soon, but of course this is tied to the difficulty of getting funding for the initiative. So,
and for you,
so that's about it.
For you personally, is it still just in your free time, or did you manage to get some?
I have an agreement with my university. It's like almost a gentleman's agreement that it's okay. They don't look if I give 10% of my time to this. It's okay. Yeah. Sometimes it goes back and forth. I mean, the University of Amsterdam has been very supportive for the whole initiative since the beginning. I think even so we're 3 people on the board of the foundation. The other 2 are people from my institute at the UvA. Jasper van Wezel and Joost van Mameren. And, I would say that there's been a lot of sympathy and support. So in that sense, yes. But you see, it's not an UvA project. I want this to be a worldwide project. So I have to balance these things. So I try to keep all my working hours for SciPost outside of my normal employment, which means that my work weeks are like, you know, by the time you get to work at 8 a.m. or something, I've already done a few hours.
Yeah, because I found it very telling that you said that one of your colleagues said either shut up about it or do something about it, which I think is a bit unfair, perhaps, because of course many people who are complaining about these things already have a full-time job, and then they also identify these problems and talk about it, and then there's this sort of conversation going on that then those same people should then also do something about it. But of course, that also comes out of your free time.
This is something which I find particularly difficult. And actually, so I'm from Quebec, and my favorite singer from Quebec is called Richard Desjardins, and he has fabulous songs about everything. And in one of his songs, he says a word in French. It says, "On n'aime pas longtemps un homme qui se plaint." So somebody who complains, we don't like for long. And I think there's a big effect in that, because it's one of the difficulties also with reform. Although you might be a very joyful character and like having fun, you are actually complaining all the time. And you're actually putting people in positions of discomfort because you're challenging their ideas and things. So this is one of the more difficult aspects, of course. You know, there's a lot of flack. You're kind of changing things, so you're wounding a lot of structures and thereby people. So, you know, not easy. So that's why one has to be careful.
Yeah.
And especially in your discipline, I think, right? But we can talk about that later.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a sense, among academics, it's okay, because quite frankly, we are always used to essentially scream at each other about equations and things like that. So we're used to debating. And I mean, for example, I had such a wonderful relationship with my supervisor for my PhD thesis. He was a Russian chap, and we were fighting the whole time. But then, you know, after fighting for hours, he would say, "Want to go to the pub?" And, you know, it's in the culture. So I think it's okay. I think within academia, it's okay.
Jeroen, you work at the Utrecht University Library. You have quite some experience with helping people set up their own open access journals and other things related to open publishing. Can you tell a bit about that, and also the project that you're working on now that I just mentioned, and I'll also put a link in the chat?
Which is not working. It will be hopefully later this year, but
yes,
people know the URL. No, so thank you for inviting me and us, the panel, to have this talk. And so we have medicine, physics. I guess I'm representing the humanities. I have a humanities background. I've been working in publishing for over 10 years. Started with book publishing and also open access book publishing, which at that time, 10 years ago, was not new, but explorative. But also started to work on full open access journals within the press I've been working for. Non-APC, by the way, so diamond approach as well. And back then, I already was really looking at the, for instance, at that time you had the open journal systems, of course, for running for 10 years. So this sort of, some tend to call it self-publishing. I like to call it do-it-yourself publishing, which implies more creativity, tooling, and also working together. I think on these projects. So, and I've been always looking at these platforms, and especially the last 5 years or so, you see an abundance of these tools and open source, some proprietary, but mainly these experiments are happening at universities also. And I can recommend the Mind the Gap report from MIT. I think it was published last year. They reviewed like 50 of these open source publishing tools, whether it's book publication tools, but also journal tools like Open Journal Systems and Janeway from Martin Eve, but also a lot of other platforms and tools, which is really interesting. But and one of the issues is that the uptake is not in the case of Open Journal Systems, but for the other tools, it's not that great yet. And that's also because of, for instance, lack of skills, also developing skills, but also if you want to start a journal, and now I come to the consultancy work I'm doing at the Utrecht University, it's not easy to start a journal. It can be easy by using these tools, but then running a journal or running a platform like Jean-Sébastien is encountering now, it's hard work. And people tend to sort of, can start now online and I can do it, and then we will see. So this is also part of my work to help editors or potential editors or journals, to help them in this process of what to use, for instance, technology, where to use it, or maybe we can make use of existing platforms or partners, and that's something I'm looking into now, more not only looking at journals, but also for instance, book publishing, but also open science practices, publishing practices, using different tools in that respect. So we are now sort of looking into this as well to start our publishing, or expand our publishing office work towards these open science publishing practices more. Not looking only at journals, but also on a broader level. And so have been working in the HSS humanities, mainly in humanities, but also social sciences areas. And one of the issues still is, but I completely agree with Jean-Sébastien that the APC model is now dominating everything. Had the debate, but also if you look at Plan S, they promised to look in, and they have now just presented some a call for research into diamond OA models, which is really good and really helpful, I think, and really needed at this time, because we need to move away from this bias or this view that open access is only sustainable by paying for articles, an APC or a BPC, if you look at books. So we need, I think, diversity in the system in that sense. And one of the things that I really liked in the last few years is, I have two examples. One is in Finland, this national approach of shared infrastructure. Journals.fi, I think I put it in the chat, so this is the link. And in Denmark, there's a similar project. It's called Tidsskrift. That's a terrible pronunciation, I think, but .dk, sorry. So in Finland, this is a collaboration between learned societies. So you can compare it to what we have in the Netherlands as the Royal Academy of Sciences, something like that, and together with societies. And in Denmark, it's the Royal Library taking this responsible role to host technology and offer journals, specifically in the humanities and social sciences, an opportunity to publish journals and keep the running costs, the technology and the cost for technology as low as possible. So these journals can basically publish cheap, and therefore, hopefully, and in some cases, they maybe charge APCs in the case of Finland or Denmark, I don't know, but the majority is non-APC focused. So, and that idea, I've been now working in the Netherlands on that idea for 1.5 years now with others and other stakeholders, we are about to launch, not now, but later this year, so-called openjournals.nl. So more or less so the project is similar to what's happening in Denmark and Finland, and also now starting up in Sweden, by the way. So first, try to have a solution, a diamond solution for the HSS, the Humanities, Social Sciences, work together with the different stakeholders in higher education in those countries. So in our case, the Dutch Research Council is involved, but also the Royal Academy of Sciences is involved. And we hope to have a broad support base coming from the institutions as well, but that will come later during the project, which is now starting up and will last for 3 years. So yeah, so I'm really interested in and also the case of Jean-Sébastien. So that's for another discipline, right? And now I'm having some trouble, so I will keep it from here. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. So you already provided a little bridge for me to
things
tell.
are happening, right? So
because you mentioned the troubles of setting up your own individual journal. So I'll quickly say something about that, because one of the reasons I'm also hosting this panel is that I started my own journal together with some other students, the Journal of Trial and Error. And we also do this through a digital publishing platform that we're setting up ourselves. And we encountered many of the problems that have already been touched upon and that we'll also explore more, such as getting funding, but also figuring out everything. That was a large trouble for us as a team of students, mostly from history and philosophy. Finding out all the technical details, all the legal details was really hard at times. And that brings me to my second question, which is, how do you deal with the fact that you need a very diverse set of skills and a broad range of knowledge on your team? So as I said, you need this technical knowledge, you need this legal knowledge, but you also need to know, for example, peer reviewers. So perhaps for the more experienced people, that is less of a problem. But for us, yeah, as master students, how to find peer reviewers was also quite a challenge at times. So again, I'll start with Gabriele. Can you tell a bit about the diversity on your team, how to deal with this problem that I described?
Sure. As you said, I think that was the main challenge for us, and I could say that I can say that it still is the main challenge, the biggest challenge for us. Finding the right human resources. So that's it, right? And for us in particular, that was challenging, because at the very beginning in our team we didn't have any coding skills, for example. No one at the very beginning of the history of Qeios could code. So if you are about to launch a digital platform, that's a big problem, right? We had at that time just notes, sketches on papers, and nothing more. So the first issue for us was finding some programmers, and we've been incredibly lucky in finding a great programmer who is still with us, and he became a co-founder of the project. And yes, so basically there are some skills that you do not have the time to build over your project, the period of duration of your project. We couldn't imagine ourselves. We were basically. I come from medicine, as I told you. The other two main co-founders are two medical researchers. So we didn't have the time. We didn't have any basic skills to start coding anything. Okay, so basically we started from that. We found a great programmer. We did a basic alpha, and then from now on, all the other expertise that were introduced into the project came from ourselves, more or less. What does this mean? It means that when you have no money, you do not have funding at all, and your expertise is very limited, more or less all the required expertise. I mean, as far as it is possible. As I told you, I started from the coding thing to tell you that you need some expertise, that are for sure outside of your initial team. That's for sure, in my opinion. Okay. For all the others, you can build them more or less yourself. as far as it is possible. So from, as you said, from legal stuff, so dealing with copyright, you talk with legal people, with lawyers, with all those expertise, and you start creating your own knowledge about the topic, you know. Even just simple things like accounting, you need to start a company, a project, or whatever. You need to have some accounting knowledge. Or when you are fundraising, you need to learn and to understand the dynamics of fundraising. So, and it's not, you know, that's not granted expertise from the very beginning. You need to acquire everything.
Yeah.
You cannot take all this stuff for granted. So the process of setting up a project like this, I mean, any type of project, but in this case, a publishing platform, which requires not just dealing with researchers in terms of users, you know, in terms of final users, where you need to provide them with a smooth submission process, for example. We do not have a submission process because they just type of an editor and they publish straight away. But even there are so many things you need to deal with in terms of UX, UI, and blah, blah, blah. Along with that, you have all the research assessment things, okay, you need to deal with. For example, just starting with getting a DOI, an SSN for your journal, for your platform. You need to be indexed in Google Scholar at least, and so on and so on and so on. So you are playing in a landscape, as Jeroen said, which is very, very complex, extremely complex. Okay, but as you can imagine, again, at the very beginning, there is no money, there is no funding. So whenever you can build some skills, some expertise for your project, you do it by yourself, more or less. Apart from, you know, those essential components like programmers, like coding skills, that if you come from a completely different environment, you need to outsource those expertise, you know. It's really, really complex, and you need to balance what, in my opinion, what are those expertise that you can build your own just to save money, time, and efforts in finding the human resources and blah, 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 and what are the required expertise that you need to outsource, more or less. And this is not easy, but it comes more or less automatically down the road.
Yeah. Jeroen, this reminds me a bit of one of the talks I had by you on how to flip your journal from a non-open access journal to an open access journal. And one of the things you said was that there is a distinct lack of people with both an in-depth publishing knowledge and in-depth law knowledge, and also in the negotiations, for example, between universities or representatives of multiple universities and the publishing world. Can you?
Yeah, and so we have all these legal issues, technical things and questions and issues, publishing things, how to do it, and what are the standards, and regarding peer review and all these things. So and for me, it's my daily business to keep track of all these specific things, because it's basically my work to help people and advise people on these things. But for a researcher, it's not their main thing, right? So and what I like to see is that because I know that so I'm having a publishing background, but I know that a lot of people working in academia, but also at the libraries, for instance, have a publishing background as well. So they worked at whatever Elsevier or a humanities press or whatever, and they eventually go to academia or they go to the library, and those people have really helpful knowledge on all these different topics, but somehow we need to sort of dive into or attach to these knowledgeable people. I think at least I'm talking for the Netherlands, for instance, to see how we can work more closely together to sort of have all these different aspects and a knowledge base around these aspects, and work in a more collaborative way in that sense, and help people like Jean-Sébastien, for instance, with specific issues he encounters, right, as a researcher. So he doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. And for me, that's one of the working at the library and helping researchers in their endeavors and their projects. For me, that's really a thing to work on in the near future, and especially about these new innovative publishing projects that are emerging and appearing, or open infrastructures. The talks we had yesterday. Yeah.
Thank you. Jean-Sébastien, so for you, I guess perhaps, maybe that's an assumption, the coding was perhaps a bit more easy. I know I only knew Python, but when I started the website coding for Journal of Trial and Error, at least I knew a bit how coding worked, so CSS and stuff was a little bit easier. Was that also the case for you, or was it still quite a difficulty, and were there other pieces of expertise that you lacked, and how did you? So
for me, there were a number of quite hilarious pieces to the story behind this. So yeah, indeed. So for my work, I mean, I'm a theorist, but sometimes the equations, I can't just push them to the end. I want to know the number, and then typically what I do is I go into C++ and I open up my Emacs, do C++, throw that on the cluster, and get the numbers out. So if you want the back end side of things, understanding how machines work and how much computational time is required to achieve a certain goal, that was okay. That was all in the bag. Yeah. Knowing Python is just something everybody knows Python, so you can do it. And at the time I decided to start SciPost, of course, I had the kind of architecture for the whole thing, how I wanted it to work on the editorial side and whatnot. And what I did is that, I just rolled up my sleeve and I sat down and I started coding. But back then I was literally doing everything just in raw HTML, PHP, and all the basic stuff, like bare metal. But I was master's coordinator for theory in Amsterdam at that point. And one of our students had come to me at some point and said, look, I'm doing half of my time professional web programming to pay for my stuff, and my studies, they go on the side of this. I got to play this. So what's your advice? Blah, 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 blah. So we talk. And at some point I say, look, I got something to show you. And I show him the kind of skeleton that I'm working on for SciPost. And he kind of looks at me like I'm completely mad. He says, man, you got to use a framework. You're out of your mind. You're just like doing everything from scratch. You got to go Ruby on Rails, or you got to go Django. Yeah, just one of the two things. Just choose something. So, so fine. I kind of started doing it. So that's why I chose to go the Django route in the end, because I think my Python level was good enough for that, and kind of broke into it. So then that's what created the first version of SciPost, running the first year and a half with this. Then so I was really developing that on my own. Maybe at some point I hired a professional programmer to have a look at the code to tell me what I was doing wrong. And then I kind of knew I was doing okay, because so he was in my office and then commenting on the code. And then he realized that this was like my first project in Django. And he refused to believe that. He said, no. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm doing okay here. So that was great. Then the other funny anecdote is that at some point, a certain January, this student from our master's program, he literally barges into my office without knocking, and he says, "Are you the guy behind SciPost?" And I go, "Yes." And he says, "I want to work for you." And I say, "Sorry, mate, ain't got no money." So it's So, but he said, no. I know how to do this stuff, because I also work like part-time as a professional programmer. So let me contribute to the project. So his name is Jeroen de Wit. So he was one of our students. I said, did a master's with me, and then now left academia. But for a good period of time, we were working together on this, and this was like spectacular. It was really such a nice collaboration on these things, but it was very much built from scratch, discussing how to do it. And so we had a few, a few inputs from other people. So, but now again, I'm back on my own on this, looking now for other developers who might want to help with the code base. So the code base is open source; it's accessible in our code.scipost.org site. But it's a bit of a strange open source project, if you want, because it's not something that I expect to be reused. It's really meant for SciPost. I would just like to have people deal with it. So there are lots of technicalities in there. So, for example, I'm really trying to build it quite solidly and quite well, but it's not perfect. You know, if you look at the documentation, it's not there. Unit tests, yeah, forget about it. That's it's working, but it's not something that would be used in textbooks about professional programming. So it's like a different thing. So there's a lot of work to be done at that level. On the side also, I'm currently doing a training as a ethical hacker because I want to know about web security and stuff. So that really goes all into the mix. And because I find the subject like super sexy, so it's like really nice to do. But all these things are super important. And then you're still only talking about the technical bits. I mean, of course, you need to know the full DevOps. Yeah, you need to know absolutely everything about the way it works with web servers, absolutely everything that you can confront. So it's really, it's a big stack, but that's the wonder of this day and age, because you just go online and you find what you need. And the old adage, you know, RTFM, yeah, so read the manual. That really works, because if you know what you need, you know where to find it. It's not rocket science. You can just start doing it. So it's in a sense extremely exciting. So to tell you the truth, I mean, as I'm scaling SciPost up, I'm kind of abandoning some things and passing them on to other people. But the very last thing that I will pass on is the back-end machine development. That's the one thing which I want to keep doing, because it's literally the most fun. But again, there's the whole layer of the actual, if you want, political, communal setup for this. So the amount of time spent in discussions with fellow scientists is like uncounted hours. Getting in touch with open access officers from various places, building up projects, filing in funding applications for things. Like I've got a funding application deadline also for next Monday I have to do. You know, there's a lot of work that goes in there, but sometimes also you get like these super fruitful collaborations. We're just launching now a project funded by the ERC about extended metadata. I see that Dagmar Meijer is among the list of participants here. So Dagmar has been a fantastic contact person at that with the ERC, immense help to get the technicalities, the project focus running and stuff. So you really end up working with professionals of the thing that really help you sharpen your knives and get your thing properly done. So this is very pleasant. But then, you know, I would say the needed amount of hours is infinite. It's really, the more you put in, the more you get out, and you can always do more. Sometimes it's quite unpleasant. For example, when you end up in discussions about evaluation of the quality of journals, impact factors, and things like that, then the discussion can get quite spicy. But you know, it's these are worthwhile discussions to have. And if you're a bit of a sport and you like a bit of action, then you know.
Can I? Because there was also a question in the chat about rewards and incentives, or at least this system, and maybe this question is also for Gabriele. So, but maybe more for Jean-Sébastien, because you're working in this field of high impact factor journals, and this whole traditional, at least traditional or existing rewards and incentives system is basically looking at where you publish, and the higher the better. We know that this is very a bad exercise, but for you, I think it's very difficult to, and we also see this with the other platforms, like for instance the Welcome Open Research, but also the how to move your authors or at least attract them to your platform in this traditional, very high impact factor focused rewards and incentive system? And maybe that question is also for you, Valid, Gabriele. How are you dealing with this in this discussion? The broader discussion, not this one, but.
So for me, I can give a quick answer. I mean, there was a lot of trust factor involved at the beginning, and that's why SciPost started in condensed matter theory, because that's my field of expertise. So the people who helped start the whole thing at first, the first wave, they were people who had known me professionally for 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. So they knew that I was not selling just salad or just dreams. This was a real thing. And I explained to them very matter-of-factly what the scenario was, when the different things would occur, and they were adventurous enough to go for it. And also, at the beginning, I was counting on the more established slice of the academics to like really get involved into the project. Mm-hmm. And to my pleasant surprise, at some point, I noticed that a number of young authors started pushing papers to SciPost, and then you're talking like. Postdocs that are slightly more senior, therefore they will definitely make a bid at staying in academia. And at one point there were so many of them that I ran a little internal survey among them. I said, look, so fantastic that you're sending your stuff to us, but can I just ask you why, what motivates you to do that? And they all answered the same thing. They said, look, the system needs to change, and the older people will not change it. So take my paper. Yeah, because if the system doesn't change, I have to live with that existing system for another 40 years. And the people who retire in 10 years, fine, no problem for them. I got to live with it for 40 years. So take my paper. Yeah, so that was really, that there are some discussions, they really fire you up, so you spent the whole weekend, you slept 3 hours because you needed to solve that thing and blah, blah, blah. And then on the Monday morning, one discussion like that, that's enough to fuel you for like 2 or 3 weeks of work. So that's how I keep the motivation for this, because once in a while such positive feedback shows up, to compensate for all the difficulties that goes through it. Yeah. But I want to emphasize this: the one reason, the single relevant reason why emerging platforms find it so difficult to make an entry into this field is because of the evaluation. There is the only factor that needs to be discussed is this one. Yep. And this is immensely frustrating. And the way I like to say it is, so in June, we're going to get an official impact factor from who. And to me, look, we've been operating for 4 years. Yeah. Anybody with an eye for scientific quality, just look at the evidence. You don't need a number. And if I take the least qualified person within the SciPost structure to judge scientific quality, and I take the most expert person in this other evaluation place, most qualified person to do scientific quality, and I compare, I still don't get an overlap. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how come the professionals who do this do not have the word for the classification of what is good and what is bad? This is the greatest parody of the publishing system, and I think it's there are many reasons why this is in place. In a sense, you can't complain about something like impact factor because it's an objectively measurable thing. It's reproducible, so it's great. What's the mistake? The mistake is to use it. Yeah, mistake is to make decisions that affect people's lives based on that. I understand it's convenient, but the crime is not the existence of the impact factor. The crime is the use of the impact factor. Yeah, so for us, essentially. As for many other initiatives, development is essentially blocked by the requirement to go through these hoops. And even if you do establish something that does demonstrably have the quality, it is not enough, because perceptions are the important thing. And it's not just perceptions, because these are really, once again, scientists' lives you're dealing with. It's their career, it's their follow-up positions. So this is very serious stuff. And I think there are many institutions out there that sign DORA and things like that, but they do not act on it. And this is really the bad thing. So if there was a much more intelligent way of evaluating scientific quality, I think we'd have a much healthier publishing system.
Gabriele, how was it for you?
Yes, so true. I mean, everything Jean-Sébastien said is really so true, so true. And I can add to that we as Qeios, we have decided to deal with the problem that Jeroen has brought this way. We think that at this time the essential link between the old publishing, traditional system way of publishing academic research, and the new one is the preprint. Preprint servers are the link between old and whatever comes in the future. So we are, as Qeios, allowing researchers, as for now, to label their publications as preprint, so that they can publish their publications on the platform and keep the option if they need, because as Jean-Sébastien said, there are so many institutions that assess the work of researchers based on impact factor and blah blah. We know that. And if your environment is one of those, you need at this time to publish in for your career, to progress with your career and blah blah blah. It seems that you need to publish in a sort of journal with an impact factor and blah blah. So we want to show at this time that preprints can make the same level of citations, the same level of news. They can make the news as much as publications published in established journals. And we are seeing that. We are seeing that with Archive, with bioRxiv, with medRxiv, with all those platforms, up to a point where we will see a change, and I think that this is inevitable. We will see a change in the sense that we will trash definitely the impact factor when we will see that a publication with no peer review, with a post-publication peer review, okay, can have the same level of quality, if not higher, just because there are more expertise in post-publication peer review than just 2 or 3 reviewers, you know? That's the main point. That's the main point. We need to use communities. We have the web. It's incredible, but the academic publishing industry is not take advantage of the web. We have community, we have the entire scientific community online, and we are not using that for peer review. Mm-hmm. Instead, we are using that, for example, for judging apartments on Airbnb or items on Amazon. Can you believe that? It's incredible. It's incredible. And so the essential link that we see now between the old system and the new system is the preprint and the way it works. So we want to show that a post-publication peer review process that has a version possibility, a limitless version possibility, the possibility to version your article limitless, is much better than the old system. At this time, you can use this as an option. You can publish your article as a preprint, and then you can choose your venue wherever you like. Okay, if your research assessment if your institution requires that based on research assessment criteria. Okay, up to a point where we will have trashed completely the impact factor and realized that a publication with all the set of author of publication level metrics, author and publication level metrics, not journal level metrics, is much better than the old system. So we are bridging this transition this way, with the possibility of preprint and all the good qualities that we see on it.
Yeah. And so from my own experience, so with our journal, we also we don't have an impact factor yet, of course, because we're like 1.5 years old. And also for us, there was this additional problem that we solely publish failure, or failure in parentheses, but this was quite an unpopular thing for people to publish about, because we were invited a lot to give talks and people reacted very enthusiastically. And then when we asked, are you yourself planning to send something in, then often the reaction we would get is, I really like the initiative and I think people should send in their failure, but I myself don't plan on doing it because I'm afraid that this, as a PhD, this will hurt my chances of getting a postdoc, or as a postdoc, this will hurt my further chances. So in that way, for us, it was indeed very much coupled to the incentive and reward system in academia, that our submissions are really dependent on how people perceive how they will be judged on publishing about failure in their research. So that's also something that we're working on a lot. It's almost, I think, half of our platform is also devoted to talking to people about this existing reward system, going to conferences to talk about this. Jeroen, you want to say something on that?
I think you are experiencing this along the way, and we all know these stories. And I think that for universities, so leadership of those universities need to take action, I think, but also maybe they're not equipped yet enough. So we need to have, or maybe work on skills, or also education. And for instance, had Dora is one thing, but how to implement it. That's a discussion we need to have in universities and with leadership, I think. On the broadest level possible. Otherwise, these things will stay within departments, within research groups, within faculty maybe, but it needs to be a broad system change in that sense to get away from at least these traditional ways of research assessment. Yeah.
And do you see any role for scientists who are not involved in those higher management layers to put up the pressure to break this conversation open?
But maybe Jean-Sébastien as professor can also. So I think that on a professor level, or if you are directing a research group, you could play this role, or you can take stance in but maybe people don't feel comfortable enough. Okay, so we need to raise those questions. Why are you not comfortable with a system change in that sense? And I think we need to have this discussion, and at least also out in the open. But maybe Jean-Sébastien can from his experience as.
I think the reality on the ground is that academics are already quite dramatically overworked on average. And to add another element to their to-do list for something that should just work by itself. I mean, you're an academic, you get into your building, you expect the toilet to work. You expect the electricity to be delivered. You expect the lift to do its function. Why can't you just expect the bloody journal system to work properly? Why do you have to do that? Why do scientists always have to do absolutely everything at every single level? It's just not normal. That's why the university infrastructure is there. It's very similar, irrespective of where you are. Universities in the Netherlands, they look just like universities in Belgium, France, UK, the US, Japan. Yeah? Every academic institution has the same challenges. So this is like a golden opportunity for international level infrastructure, international level collaboration, a kind of UNESCO approach to this problem. And the worst thing is that doing this would also make absolutely perfect business financial sense, because you would be able to dramatically reduce the investment in this. So I think it's a mixture of things. On the one hand, scientists are not free to make the decision of where they publish because of the consequences it has on their families. They might lose their jobs. They might not have the follow-up job. They might not get a job if they're a postdoc. So they're not free to do that. They understand very well what the system is, but collective action in academia, it's not going to happen. We're not activists.
Yeah.
A scientist, you tell something to a scientist, the first reflex of the scientist is going to be to point out the flaws in your reasoning.
Yeah.
You're not going to get collective action from that. Yeah, it's not, but it doesn't mean that collective action is not needed. Yeah, and you see the pressure. I think now what's happened is that the publishing system has become so utterly ludicrous that even the impossible to organize scientists are actually organizing themselves, because at some point you got to go, okay, fine, yeah, maybe that's needed. But I think that's the reason why the academic involvement is limited. Overwork, other priorities, little collaboration. So that's the role of the higher up administration and institution. And, you know.
And linking to that self-organization and to one of the questions, or one of the people in the comments mentioned that they're also setting up their own platform. Does each of you have a short tip or a pitfall to avoid for people who are also going into setting up their own publishing platforms? They wanted to do similar things to you. Perhaps Gabriele can start.
Yep. Should I start? Okay. Connecting to what all that we said before, that Jeroen said, Jean-Sébastien said, the landscape is really, really complex. The landscape where this type of product publishing platforms are playing is extremely complex. So in my opinion, the belief that at the very beginning your vision is complete is the most faulty thing you can do. Okay, your vision at the very beginning is so lacking in so many aspects, you know, and you need to fill up all these holes in your visions with the feedback from the community, with the feedback from the actual users, with the pains that the actual users are experiencing. So basically, once you provide the initial vision, my tip, that comes directly from my experience, is that you need to listen to the community, to the feedback, even just the tiny pieces of feedback from the community, from the actual users, so that you can, as I said before, you can fill all these gaps between your vision and the real, actual usable product. It's impossible to think of a great plan that is drawn, from the very beginning, and it works up to the end. In my opinion, it's impossible. From my personal experience, it is impossible. The pieces that you add, all the pieces that you add down the road are so many. So listen carefully to the feedback from your usership, and act on it. The delay on action, or the fact that you are not listening to feedback at all, I think is the main reason why many projects. We're talking about publishing platforms, but we can extend this reasoning outside. Are one of the main reasons why many projects go bust. So, if any, my biggest advice, tip to anyone who want to start with a new publishing platform is listen carefully. Okay, start from your vision, but listen carefully to any feedback you can get from the actual users, not from the friend of the friend of the friend, but the actual users. Please, the actual users, because they are the ones with pains that they experience, any lacking in the UX of your project, or pains in, we've just discussed research assessment and all this stuff, and so on and so on. So that is my main tip. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Also JS.
Or you want to do the traditional order, or
No. I just wanted to add, also because of the sake of time, but just to follow up on Gabriele mentioning the scaling small, and this is being used by Janneke Adema from the radical OA movement. More looking at book publishing, by the way. But I guess you can take this also for these kind of projects, right? So larger projects, but then scaling small. Listen to your peers and your the feedback you're getting from your network, and then experiment, and then move forward in that sense. So yeah.
If I can add one thing on this, if I can, consider it's just the meaning of the peer review. You know, is the same meaning. You provide your research study, and then you're waiting for the feedback to increase the quality of your study. Nothing more than that. So it's just a matter of using the same, so applying the same system you are experiencing every day in your research activities to your project. Just provide your vision, and then add to that all the feedback that you can get from any users out there. Sorry for the addition.
Anything to add to that, Jean-Sébastien?
I can be very short, you know. So you want tips for people who are planning to do this. Well, you know, it's not a tip; it's a question. What's stopping you? Just do it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
21st century, you know, that's what technology is for. Just do it.
Exactly.
I think that's a nice note to end on. Just do it for everyone watching. I would like to thank you all for participating in the panel and for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for everyone for watching.